All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Human Rights Commission meeting, regular meeting on July the 18th of this year, 2024, here at City Space. We're excited to have our panelists and legislative committee people, members here. And we hope we have one more come through as they're hopefully on the way from Richmond. Todd, would you please do the roll call?
Happily to do that. Ernest,
Here.
Wolfgang,
Here.
Mary,
Here.
Charlie is not here. CD is not here. Catherine just told us she would not be able to attend.
Yes, saw that.
Suzanne,
Here.
Heather,
Here.
there, great.
Hey, Heather,
The technology has worked. So we do have a quorum.
thank you for joining us.
Thank you for, thanks for accommodating me and letting me be online.
Awesome. So let us recite our mission together. All right, 1, 2, and 3.
As a strong advocate to justice and equal opportunity by providing citywide leadership and guidance in the area of civil rights.
All right. Members of the public that are participating virtually, if you experience any technical difficulties, you may call 434-970-3115. Any staff member will assist you. Again, that number is 970-3115. And the staff member will assist you. All right. We're now to public comment. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak? The committee welcomes comments and questions and commits to listening carefully and thoughtfully to what is presented. A maximum of 16 public comment time slots are allotted per meeting. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes to speak. The commission requests that members of the public refrain from engaging in personal attacks against commissioners and staff members and asks that comments and questions focus on matters related to human rights within the city. And if you are listening by phone, so you push, there was a *9 to let us know. Okay. All right. Does anybody from the public have any comments? Okay. All right. We would like to approve some minutes from March 16th, June 6th, June 20th, and June 27th. I hope all commissioners have had the opportunity to look over those minutes. Does anyone have any corrections, amendments, or anything for those minutes? Okay. Todd?
Ready for it?
Yeah.
So we'll do you want to make a motion to approve all of them at once, or do you want to do separate?
Yes, I'll make a motion, since nobody had any objections or amendments to anything. I'll make a motion that we approve all 4 of the selected minutes that were put forth in our packet.
Okay,
Second.
sounds good. I'll do a vote. Ernest,
Yes.
Wolfgang,
Yes.
Mary,
I just want to say I really appreciate the detailed minutes and I read them, but I missed several of those meetings, so I'm going to abstain.
fair. Let's see, then Suzanne,
I approve. I was not at the 6:20 meeting, but I read everything else. And so
Okay.
yes.
great. And Heather,
Yes, I approve.
great.
Thank you, everyone. All right, business matter chair update. Really have any updates other than it was nice to hang out with Todd and Lily at the, what is that, neighborhood?
Healthy Street, healthy.
Healthy Streets, Healthy People. That was outside, it was hot. But it was good turnout. And good to talk to people in the community and let people know what we do. as a committee, and to the public, we are one commissioner short. So if there's anyone in the public that would like to join the Human Rights Commission, you may go online to the city website and fill out a form there. You have to do it by July 31st at 5 p.m. So if you'd like to join us, we're glad to have you with us. Yeah, I don't have anything else. No, don't have anything else. So let's go ahead and go to the office report, staff report.
All right. Lily, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first? Okay.
Thank you to Ernest and Wolfgang for coming to Healthy Streets, Healthy People. That was lovely. We are hosting Disability Pride Month trivia on the 25th, which is Thursday of next week, at Firefly, if anybody would like to attend. And I have the dates in there for the larger annual festivals that are coming up. Those are usually, there's a lot of traffic and it's a long day, so if anybody is able to help with those, I would really appreciate it. And I believe that's it for me.
And I'm sorry, Lily, but that's in our packet?
Yes.
The dates, okay, great. Okay,
In the
I see.
staff report
Yep,
section.
thank you.
Thank you, Lily. And
I guess question,
Go
are there
ahead.
any of the festivals you're like, I really want someone at this one?
I was just looking at the list to try to answer that question
Yeah.
ahead of time. The answer is West Haven Day, Solo
Hmm.
Seville,
Was that-
Pride, and Sabroso.
Okay.
We can.
That was all of them.
We can try to figure out how much staff capacity there is to cover it and then let you know if there are any that staff can't.
I could probably be at West Haven, I'd probably be like healthy people, healthy streets, healthy people, be double dipping between bread and roses, but I could probably like be there with plants. Yeah, I'll try to make some. I'll send you the dates
Yeah.
when I can make it.
I'll probably do West Haven Day. After that, September, Saturdays are tough.
Probably be at Pride anyway.
So. But I'll let you know, we have some time, so but I'll
Yes.
email and confirm just to make sure we don't have too many commissioners.
right. We don't want that.
All of us descending.
6 of us behind one table. Overwhelming.
Oh, boy. You did not let people know. Okay, let's see, look, 6 to 7:30, I need to see the thing on 5 o'clock, so. Yes. All right. Anything else from the office?
well, not too much. We just a heads up that we did go to council on the 15th and presented the ordinance.
How did that go?
I think it went okay. They really didn't have too many questions. They did ask, I think they raised a question about the research bit that we said, the sort of mandatory study every 2 years, where we said, well, we can just do the work, but to say that it's a mandatory study starting on this date going forward every 2 years seems a little bit arbitrary, so that was my explanation, is that we can do the work and be nimble and like not have to be bound to this kind of strict rule, and I didn't get any, no, we want to keep it or anything like that, so I'm anticipating the second reading on August 5th, so I'll be there again to answer any additional questions. They haven't sent me any email questions either, so it may just go through, in which case that would be great, and then we'll be on track to get the approved ordinance submitted to HUD and go forth with the Fair Housing Assistance Program application, I guess it would be called, so.
Good work.
So that's good, yeah, thank you all for reviewing it and sort of going through it twice ahead of time, that's really helpful. The other thing is we, as noted in here, we are hiring for intake specialist position, it closed on the 15th. I got 58
Oh, nice.
applications, I've read all of them, at least once, now I'm going through them again. And so our goal is to hire sometime in August, hopefully. Those processes are never, you never know exactly when you'll finish, but that is the goal, so that's a good thing. Other than that, I don't think I have any other updates for you at the moment.
Do you have a plan when you would like to hire that person? Have that class?
August would be great, but I don't know like the exact date, because it's completely dependent on when we can schedule interviews and then when people can start, but yeah. Yeah, I think we could get it done sometime early August would be the goal.
All right. Is that it in the office?
I think so.
I usually ask, but are you noticing any trends in the kind of type frequency of contact? of People coming into the office?
Gosh, let's see.
Is it like total numbers seem to like go down a little bit in June?
Right now, it seems a little, yeah, it's a little bit less, in June. I don't know what that is, but, I don't know that I have any trends that I can point to.
That's fine.
We could dig into that a little bit more about like which protected activity typically is housing.
Yep.
And I think we do we have any housing ones right now? We have a public accommodations case open. They're all down here, the ones that are open. It's kind of a mix, really. I think we have actually more public accommodation than housing right now, which is a little bit unusual, but, yeah. Things are cooking. I did want to say one more thing. This is Jenny's last meeting. So Jenny's going off to grad school, so that's exciting, after a 3-year internship.
A long time.
Many meeting minutes typed and filed and posted. Thank you, Jenny.
Yes.
We're excited for next week, next Friday is the last day we will be benefiting from Jenny's support, but
Where are you heading off to, and what are you studying?
So I'm doing forensic linguistics at Hofstra up on Long Island.
Great.
Yeah, so it's been great being able to do so many minutes for you all, and like, it's a shame I haven't been able to be in person as much, but I've seen you if you haven't seen me.
we've learned what the possibilities are for remote work, the amazing things we can do even from very far away sometimes, so much appreciated. Thank you so much, Jenny. Great, I think that's, anything else? Am I forgetting anything? Lily? Okay, thanks.
Thank you. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and switch over to our work session, legislative priorities panel. Tonight, we have with us, Laura Dobbs from Housing Opportunities Made Equal of Virginia. We also have Virginia State Senator of District 11, Mr. Craig Deeds. We hope that House Delegate Christina Colson will make it. She's trying to make it this way from Richmond. And I don't see any of the commissioners from the other human rights commissions around the state.
I think we do have them virtually.
Virtually? Oh,
Yeah,
oh,
We have Michael Sims from the Fairfax County Office of Human Rights and Equity Programs and Dr. Virginia Jenkott from Virginia Beach Human Rights Commission online.
oh, well, thank you. Well, let them say hello.
And also, excuse me, also Elizabeth Johnson from the Alexandria Human Rights Commission.
Okay.
Thank you.
wonderful.
Virginia and Michael, would you guys like to say hello, please?
Absolutely. My name is Mike Sims. I am the Director of the Office of Human Rights and Equity Programs in Fairfax, Virginia, and I am glad to be here today.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Mhm.
And Virginia? She might be away. Well, I apologize. I did not know that you guys are online, so I'm glad you guys are here with us on this evening. I would like to all right, so back in January of this year, we had a meeting where we had Christina Colson, but I think she had only been on the job 3 days. She hadn't been on the job very long. And we also had Mr. Stroman, that's why our city attorney, and we had Mr. Lloyd Slip was with us as well. And at that time, we talked about some of the things that city council brought up as a statement of legislative positions for the 24-25 regular General Assembly session. So, Mr. Dees, I'm gonna call out some things that were brought up by city council. And you can kind of, I think some things went through, then I think some things did not. So, and you can give me a nod on yes or no. So I don't think one of the ones was to expand the option of 1 cent local tax
That,
increase.
that passed, passed the House and the Senate. We sent it to the governor. But, you know, the problem is this governor he's against tax. He's one of those folks whose first priority is no taxes, no new taxes. And he saw this as a way of, raising taxes. And he wasn't gonna be for it. And it's silly. Honestly, my view, the sales tax is a regressive form of tax. It's not an ideal way to do it, but it's worked in a lot of communities to raise money to build schools. And if it's worked in those, everybody else ought to have the advantage of it too.
Yeah.
So we had a statewide bill passed to allow localities. It passed the House and the Senate. The governor vetoed it. And we don't have 2/3 vote to overturn gubernatorial vetoes. He vetoed like 201 bills this
Yeah.
year. No governor and had never vetoed more than like 150, 160 during a 4-year period of time. He did 201 this year. All the records are broken.
Oh, gosh.
No, no way.
Another one was continued funding of Virginia Home Visiting Programs. This was they call it a TANF, a Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program.
TANF program, I think that got funded. I don't know
Okay.
whether it got funded to the extent that it was desired. There's never enough money to fund everything as much as people want, but the budget is kind of your moral statement of what's important. And it has to be adequate, but you have basically 140 chefs in the kitchen, 100 delegates and 40 senators. Now, I'm kind of fortunate because I've been there a while. I'm on the conference committee. I'm one of the people in the final cutting table in terms of what gets funded. And I think that was funded.
I was like 46 million. Salaries for members of local governing bodies. I think that passed.
I think that passed. And I
Yeah.
think the governor signed it. Yeah.
Funding for regional transit authorities.
That's one of those things that you're never going to have enough money for it. So a little bit probably was funded, but not enough.
Gotcha. Amend land use ordinance advertisement laws which unduly restrict council's ability to deliberate.
Well, I don't know about that one. I don't know what that.
That's a tough one. I'll have to do some research on that.
If you have bill numbers in particular, I could even look it up right now.
I don't. And I should have known you were gonna ask me that. I'll do my homework better next time. Allow greater flexibility for certain boards and commissions to conduct all virtual meetings.
Now there is significant amount of opposition to that. I mean, we have tried a couple of different ways to give local governments the ability to have more, for example, Albemarle County, 2 years ago, they wanted a bill to basically, allow them to appoint people who are that could attend 100% of their meetings for these advisory commissions, virtually. Their point was people have to work for a living. This will allow them to participate even and still work. And I even think that's a bill I introduced for them, but I met, even in a Democratic legislature, there are Democrats and Republicans that don't like that. And when you are in a Democratic legislature, we have 21 out of 40 members of the Senate, 51 out of 100 members of the House. So we don't have big majorities. So you have to find a way to keep all your people together and probably get some Republican votes to have a chance to get the governor to sign it.
Yes,
And that's a bill that didn't go anywhere. I think, I'm thinking I introduced it in 2023.
And then last one was increase affordable housing accessibility by enhancing tenant rights.
Well, I don't know. I think that some people will say that tenants' rights have advanced, but other people will say they haven't advanced enough.
Right, yeah.
Well, we had a bill this year, I'm not on the housing commission, I'm not on the committee that deals with disputes in local government, but I am on the committee on commerce and labor. I chair that committee, and we had a bill this year to require utilities to notify, to give notice and before they give extra notice before they cut off utilities and to prevent cutoffs sometimes, even when people haven't paid for the service.
Yeah.
And so that made a lot of people mad, but it was one of those issues that we'd been germinating for a number of years. And a work group had gotten together, and that work group included consumers and folks from the utility world. And they'd worked out kind of a compromise, and we got that passed. But that's certainly not, probably not the extent of what you were aimed at with that.
Well, thank you very much. I will give you a chance to breathe. And I'll ask Ms. Laura Dodd, if you could come up and talk to, yes, please, and talk to us about your organization. I would love to hear more.
Sure. My name's Laura Dobbs. I'm the Director of Policy at Housing Opportunities Made Equal of Virginia. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, and we're what's called a Fair Housing Initiative program called FIP. So we're a non-government entity that helps enforce the Fair Housing Act, both the federal and the state fair housing laws. So we help do investigation enforcement, help people file fair housing complaints, file litigation on behalf of people who have been faced discrimination. In addition to that side, we also have a housing counseling program. So we offer down payment assistance and housing counseling for the Richmond region, as well as foreclosure prevention. And we also have the only program in the state that assists folks who have a housing choice voucher through the Richmond and Redevelopment Housing Authority to help them be successful in placing their voucher and go through that housing search. So having the combined two gives us a really unique perspective on the type of issues that people are facing, and that informs the bedrock of our policy work. So this past year, I joined HOME in August last year. I came from Virginia Poverty Law Center, where I did a lot of similar work, but now in an organization where, trying to deal with discrimination is the primary focus. And this past session, we saw a record number of pro-housing bills. It was incredibly encouraging. Much of that passed the legislature, a lot of it on a bipartisan basis. But unfortunately, the governor didn't share the same priorities and vetoed a lot of those efforts, even ones that had pretty broad bipartisan support. So it's hard to know what's going to happen next year. Unfortunately, we have the thinking that even people who supported the legislation last year may change their vote on the same legislation next year just because of how the governor acted on the bill. So we're thinking a bit more strategically about that. But two of the big buckets that we have a lot of concern around are the barriers to housing access, particularly the instances we see with our clients who have housing choice vouchers. Even though Virginia added source of funds as a protected class in 2020, we see a lot of landlords find other ways to subvert those protections, in addition to outright denials. This past year, we collected our data to see what the most common types of discrimination complaints we're hearing. Number one is disability, which is pretty persistent with trends we've seen in the past. The second is source of funds violations, still fairly rampant. And the third is race discrimination. And when someone is denying someone with a housing choice voucher or any other type of legitimate source of funds, whether it's, disability benefits, benefits, or security, that's often proxy for other protected classes, such as race, disability, and elderliness. So it's, kind of a triple whammy when you have someone's denying. And the most common way we're seeing people getting denied now when they're applying for housing. Most large landlords these days, or landlords in general, use tenant screening processes when they're reviewing applications. So they're relying on a third party and to do pull their consumer report and make a recommendation whether or not they should rent to that person. And we're seeing a pretty heavy reliance on people's credit score, even though that is really intended to determine someone's risk of borrowing money, not whether or not they pay the rent. And there's a lot of racial bias baked into credit scores. And it also doesn't account for people's history of paying rent on time, or people have had to rely on the secondary credit market through things like payday lending, those types of things. And so a lot of people are credit invisible and are harmed by this. In particular to voucher holders, a lot of landlords are calculating their income incorrectly. We see a lot who are requiring people to make 3 times the rent in order to qualify for a unit. And they're basing it on the total amount of the rent, not the tenant's portion. We think that already violates Virginia's fair housing law, and there's good attorney general guidance on that. But a lot of landlords just don't know. And so there needs to be more outreach and education of landlords if they know about these protections and how they apply. But there's other barriers such as application fees. Most landlords require each person is going to be occupant in the unit to apply separately and pay an application fee. They're allowed to charge $50 non-refundable, as well as any out-of-pocket expenses. So passing on the cost of running that consumer report, we're seeing a lot more people have a hold fee. So, to hold open a unit while you apply and see if you qualify, that's a huge barrier. So when you have someone who may already be struggling, they don't have good income, hence they qualify for a voucher, or they have some other type of public assistance to help pay for the housing, they're having to apply 8-10 times and paying these non-refundable fees every time, which is a huge financial burden and barrier. And we've had a number of clients who have gone through this, keep getting denied without being told, and then end up losing their voucher because they weren't able to pay in time. One of the pieces of legislation that Delegate Carlson co-pagined this year would have created more transparency in that tenant screening process. So one, the people know when they're applying somewhere what those minimum criteria are. That way they can make more informed decisions about the type where they're applying. But also if a landlord denies a person, to provide the reasons for the denial. Right now, under the Federal Fair Credit Reporting Act, if someone is making a decision based on someone's consumer report, they have to disclose that. But unlike something like if you're applying for a loan or a credit card, in which case they have to tell you the reason for the denial, that is not required in housing. So people are getting told that they're denied and that it was based on a consumer report, but not the reason for the denial. And if you don't know the reason, it's hard to find, is this based on discrimination? Is there an error in my report? Those type of things. And, fortunately, we have housing counselors to help people try to navigate to figure out the reason. But a lot of these consumer reporting companies make it really hard to get a copy of that report. They require you to list like your past 7 addresses and send a copy of your ID, which is, I think, more difficult than information I had to send it for the bar exam. Really difficult and huge barrier for someone who is already have a hard time accessing housing. That bill did pass, but the governor vetoed it. So we're still waiting whether or not that's something we want to bring back next year or wait another year, but it was just a pure transparency bill. In previous years, there was efforts to limit those application fees. I believe it was 2 years ago, Delegate Price had a bill that created what's called a portable tenant screening report, such that if a tenant worked with a housing counseling agency to pull together their credit information, their past, their past addresses to prove that they would be a good tenant. If they provided that to the landlord, then the landlord could not charge an application fee. But I don't believe that one even made it out of committee at the time. So it's something to consider going into next year just to help remove some of those barriers. How are you doing, Delegate?
I was trying to whisper.
I was just talking about the transparency and tenant screening bill that you co-patroned this past year.
Awesome.
Yeah. But what that bill did not address was the application fee piece. And another huge barrier we see is the security deposits. Under current law, landlords can charge up to 2 months rent, which is, most people don't have that amount of cash just sitting around. A lot of landlords will adjust that based on someone's credit score. So someone who might already have a good paying job and have a great credit score is paying maybe $200 for a security deposit, but someone who doesn't is having to pay a full 2 months rent in addition to those other application fees. So thinking about, could we create a program that is like a security deposit fund for voucher holders? That, rather than that person having to pay upfront, the landlord could go back in after the person moves out. If they did in fact damage the property, they could pull from that fund. Other places that have implemented this have actually seen a pretty low utilization rate, indicating that landlords oftentimes don't actually need to access that fund because there wasn't any damage to the property. Meanwhile, you've eliminated that barrier for the tenant who's trying to get into housing. Other issues that are particular to voucher holders and the source of funds protections. We're continuing to see a lot of people who are getting denied or the leases non-renewed because they got rent relief at some point during the pandemic, which we think is a clear violation of source of funds, but could use some clarification in state law as well. And we are also seeing issues with the current payment standards with voucher holders, not being able to find something that they can actually place their voucher because it costs more to rent there than what their voucher will cover. Additionally, with the past few years, it used to be that, the whole purpose of the voucher program is allow someone to move to an area and opportunity. So people wouldn't be confined to that jurisdiction where they got the voucher. They could go somewhere that might be closer to the job or to the school that meets their child's needs. But a few years ago, there was a decision made that you could only place a voucher in the jurisdiction where the voucher comes from. So someone who's in Charlottesville who gets a voucher from the Charlottesville Housing Authority can only place their voucher within the limits of Charlottesville. They could not go into Albemarle County, which really limits people's choices and opportunities, particularly in cities like Charlottesville that have a very tight housing market. A tight housing market makes things very ripe for discrimination.
Is that a function of federal law or is that a state
It's
provision?
a state issue
So it
and
could be changed.
I think so. And it was places, I think it was more specifically like Chesterfield, because they have vouchers, but it's administered through Virginia Housing. And they are arguing that the voucher holders from Richmond were competing with voucher holders in Chesterfield, which I think is just a little bit of a ridiculous argument, a bit disingenuous. And it just confines, people who have a voucher holder from RHA to just the city of Richmond, which has some certain racial disparities there. And the other big issue that we're really concerned about is how do we prevent displacement, which has a lot of an area that we see ripe for discrimination as well. One of the things that we had during the pandemic was the 14-day parapet. So, as soon as someone is late on rent, sometimes landlords will have a grace period, but if they are late, the landlord will send a notice saying you have 5 days to pay all of what you owe, which at that point is going to include the late fee, or I'm going to move forward with the eviction. And for most people, 5 days is not enough time to get the rent together. During the pandemic, it was 14 days, so that gave people extra time to access rental assistance or get another paycheck to try to catch up. And there's been repeated efforts to extend that permanently. Again, it passed the General Assembly, but the governor vetoed the bill. I think Delegate Price is committed to continue to bring that back until we get it through. The other piece, there's simply not enough subsidies for people to help pay the rent. And there's a proposal this year to create what's called the 5,000 Families Program, which is basically a state voucher program, specific for families with children. We know the biggest predictor of whether or not someone is going to face an eviction are, number one is, do they have a child in the home, a school-age child, and the second is race. So this would really address families who are at highest risk simply because they have a family in the home. That was a pretty significant budget ask. So as the senator mentioned, it was a pretty tight budget this year. It didn't make it in, but I think there's going to be efforts to bring it back next year as well. And the other effort that we had this year that remains a big concern is about retaliation. Virginia's protections against tenant retaliation are fairly weak. In order to succeed, it only protects against if your landlord threatens to evict you, or if they actually evict you. It does not protect against harassment, which seems, so it should be a given. And in order to succeed on a retaliation claim, the tenant has to prove that the landlord intended to retaliate against them. That's a higher standard than we see in a lot of criminal cases, and it's really hard to prove. A lot of other states have a burden shifting method of dealing with this, similar to the employment context. You know, if an employer fires someone, within, like, say the employee was trying to unionize his fellow coworkers, and then the employer fires them. That employee could file a claim retaliation, saying that they fired me because I was trying to unionize everyone. And then it goes to the landlord to have some other justification for firing the person, such as underperforming. If we had the same standard for that as we do in rental cases, that employee would have to prove that their employer intended to fire them solely because of the unionizing efforts. So it's really difficult. We hardly see any retaliation claims, probably because we know they don't succeed, which makes it hard for tenants to assert their rights. I can't tell you the number of people I've talked to who are afraid to complain to the landlord about the bad conditions in their home because they're worried that the landlord's going to turn around and evict them or non-renew their lease or do some other type of reprisal, let alone file a lawsuit against their landlord for not keeping the place up. And when someone's living in conditions that are really terrible, it's usually because they have few other housing choices and they don't want to do anything to put that into jeopardy. So there's a bill this year that works pretty closely with the realtors and apartment managers on to come to some language that makes sense, that helps lower that burden of proof, while also ensuring that the landlords have some protection. Again, passed with pretty bipartisan supports, but the governor vetoed the bill. So my understanding is there might be some effort to bring that back as well.
May I ask 2 questions?
Sure.
Great. What would be an example of an intent, finding and proving an intent to retaliate? Would you need like an actual screenshot or an email so that I am like not renewing your lease because of
Yes.
this?
Yes. Yes. So just like the smoking gun, basically, is what you would need to prove intent.
And then does a non-lease renewal count as retaliation?
A landlord in Virginia, we don't have just cause eviction, so a landlord could choose not to renew your lease and do not have to provide any reason. Now, they can't non-renew for a retaliatory reason, but that just means they don't have to say anything. They just say, I'm not renewing your lease, no further comment. Even if it is a response to retaliation, I've seen these specific examples where, tenants had made several code complaints and were trying to organize, had gotten the landlord to agree to slow down the increase on rent. And then 3 months later, those, random 6 people who just haven't have been the ones met with the landlord, all of their leases were not renewed. But it's hard to prove because the, landlord didn't say explicitly why, just said, oh, I just decided not to renew your leases. So there's not really a good way to read it. It's difficult. And the last piece I'll talk about is actually more affects homeowners and helping prevent against displacement. It's called the Low Income Owner Occupant Tax Relief. Unfortunately, given the way that Virginia's tax code is set up, it does require a constitutional amendment, but it would allow, if passed, it would allow localities to provide tax relief for low income owner occupant homeowners, which really helps in areas like Charlottesville that has increasing tax assessments. It creates a lot of displacement pressure. People just cannot keep up with the increasing tax burden. Right now, there's already the authority to provide tax relief for elderly and permanently disabled and surviving spouses of people who have fallen in action in the military. So it's just a little bit further expansion on some existing authority programs to be a bit more flexible, so you're not confined to just those.
And this is property tax relief.
Yes, property tax relief, yes. But because it's a constitutional amendment, they would have to pass the legislature next year, have an election in between, pass again the following year, and then go to a ballot initiative. But my understanding that at least Delegate Carr in Richmond is interested in bringing it So I think there is some momentum to make it happen. We'll see how the General Assembly handles constitutional amendments more generally. But it's, I think, something she's committed to and something that Richmond is supporting. But I could keep going on about housing stuff all day. So I'll stop there, but I'm happy to answer any questions that they come up, and for anything that was, introduced in the past 4 years or so. If you want a little bit more of the legislative history there, for further context, I'm happy to provide that as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Stay for a second.
Okay.
Please, I have a question. How do we get landlords to be more I don't know, compassionate, empathetic? I mean, it just,
Ethical.
yeah, I mean, is there anything that can be done legislatively? Because I mean, they have so much power. And, and people, and housing is such a need. And, I mean, I understand it's a way for some people to build their wealth and that type of thing. But I mean, this is just really concerning.
I mean, that's $1 million question, right? I will say for our clients who have vouchers, they have most success with smaller landlords renting in single family homes. It's these larger multifamily properties that we've seen the issue. Even when we are administering Richmond's eviction diversion program, over that course of that period of time, we saw a change in the flexibility of individual property managers to assist. They had less and less autonomy and more told by whatever out-of-state business headquarters of how to run things. I think the only way to really deal with that is just having strong enough protections. And, having a right of protection is meaningless unless you can actually enforce it. Anything that you put in there has to have some teeth that the tenant could actually succeed in working with that. I mean, I think, a softer way to approach it is also just committing more resources to fair housing education and outreach. One of the ways that we educate landlords is by suing them. And we've had success with changing practice that way, but also, educating the industry. And we've developed pretty good relationship with some landlords who have an interest through doing trainings for them. But that's not going to reach everyone. If someone's simply not interested, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I was just, that was one of the things I thought about too was education. But again, that person has to want to get educated or be educated in this situation. And, and you really, it's hard to ask someone not to put their house up, for lease or rent or what have you. And it just feels like, it'd be nice if that was the case, that they go through a process like that so that they will be ethical and, it's just so tough.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about whether having lawyers represent tenants in eviction cases would address these issues, or the law is so substantively weak that can't having lawyers doesn't overcome the weakness of the laws.
I think it's yes and. There's of course a benefit just purely from having an attorney. Our court system is designed as an adversarial system. So when you have one side who has an attorney, one who doesn't, the person who doesn't have an attorney is just going to naturally be disadvantaged. And it varies across the state of, how often a landlord has an attorney versus a tenant. But I think the highest percent I've seen of tenants having attorneys is 2% of people facing evictions. Some areas, like if you're more rural parts, maybe only 60% of landlords have an attorney. But in, the urban crescent, about 86% of landlords want to quote an attorney. So that's just a disadvantage outright. And these eviction, I don't know if anyone's been to General District Court to see this, it may be a little bit different in Charlottesville, but these cases happen very quickly. And if you don't have an understanding of the language or how things work, it is hard to speak up and voice your rights, even when you have a valid defense. In places that have implemented some type of right to counsel, not only have they seen a reduction in the number of evictions, but also a huge reduction in the number of eviction filings, which means that landlords are making a different calculation about whether to sue their tenant, knowing that they might have the right to an attorney and have in the courtroom. You know, some of the bigger drivers of eviction in Virginia are your larger landlords that are using evictions as a rent collection method. A lot of times they aren't even removing the person from the property. They're just using it as a coercive method to get that person to pay rent, which just puts more cost on that tenant because now they're paying the late fees, the court costs and attorney's fees, which landlords always pass on to the tenant, which makes it hard to catch up the next month. So it is a pretty burdensome system that way. The other benefit of having a right to counsel and more tenants in court, like I mentioned, you know, the highest percent we've seen in any court jurisdiction is 2% of tenants having an attorney. That just shows you how little there's like someone presenting that side of the case law to the judge and how often they're getting these arguments in front of the court, which really impacts case law and interpretations of existing code. So if you have more attorneys, more often making arguments and pointing to existing case law and strengthening that, I think that'll also help improve upon substantive rights. Things are already in the code, but judges interpreting it badly because they're only hearing from a landlord attorney and no one else. So twofold benefits of just having an attorney in general for something such as losing a roof over your head fundamentally is important, but also developing the case law. Now, attorneys also need good laws to work with. So improving the statute is important, but even if we don't improve existing code, there's still ways to improve the law through having.
Thank you.
Any questions? Yes.
Similar to Ernest's question, looking specifically at the section for source of funds, what strategies have you found to be like productive in advocating for your clients who are experiencing a discrimination on the basis of source of funds?
Right. I mean, I think the
Education outreach, suing, but what other things are in our toolkit?
I mean, the counseling is certainly like, I would say top tier there, because they're able to walk through that tenant and identify when that discrimination occurs. Because a lot of people don't know when they've been, you know, discriminated, like that there's some civil rights violation. They just know they've been treated badly and don't know that they might have some right that they can exercise there. And also just having that support as you're trying to exercise that right. An important role that our counselors play is educating the landlord about those protections of saying, hey, you've denied my client based on this, but here's the Attorney General's guidance to show that you did the calculation incorrectly and be able to correct their behavior without having to sue them. But also investigations and enforcement, you know, a big thing that we do at home is fair housing testing, where we send in matched pairs, one who has one set of characteristics, one has a different set of characteristics. We have them go out there and see if they receive the same treatment. So they will apply to the same apartment. One will say, I have a voucher, the other one won't, and who gets the call back, who is told that there's an available unit. And so being able to track that and see if you can repeat it is helpful. When we do that, we then go to that landlord or the realtor or whoever and describe what happened. Sometimes we can get them to the table and conciliate and change their policies. Other times it requires suing them, but it just depends on how receptive they are. But that's like a helpful tool for uncovering discrimination at a more systemic level. Which I don't know if the Human Rights Commission is going to be doing any of that now that you're working towards becoming a FAP, but something to consider for doing resources too.
Anybody else?
I appreciate you sharing me today.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
thank you. Good stuff, but yeah.
The
Yes.
next person on the list is Dr. Jen Cott from Virginia Beach, but she's having technical problems.
Okay,
So if you'd like to just move to the next available person while I fix that, then that would be
Um,
best. Which I believe would be Dr. Johnson from Alexandria.
okay.
She's on Zoom.
Dr. Johnson?
Good evening, and thank you very much for allowing me to attend. Regarding the Alexandria Human Rights Commission, we submitted 34 legislative priorities. In the interest of time, rather than to review all 34 legislative priorities with you, I will give you the broad categories. We submitted 6 legislative priorities to recognize and subsequently strengthen state partnerships with localities. We submitted 11 legislative priorities to preserve and expand local authority and funding for localities. We submitted 5 legislative priorities to protect and support underserved populations. Additionally, we submitted 6 legislative priorities to enhance public engagement, health, and safety. And finally, we submitted 6 legislative priorities to improve, promote, and encourage clean energy investment. If you would like, I can go over any of those individually.
I personally want to hear more about the, and I don't know if there's a broad umbrella, but in terms of what you did around protecting and supporting the underserved, and if there's anything specific to housing or pieces in there, I would love to hear more about that.
All right, regarding underserved population, we supported legislation that prevented evictions and protected individuals and families who are housed and facing legislative housing challenges, to include legislation to reinstate the 14-day pay or quit notice, legislation to require full fee disclosure and transparency, and to require any fee increases to coincide with the terms of the lease, as well as legislations that will require critical lease information be made available in languages other than English, and to establish a minimum amount owed for evictions filings. Now, I must say, in Alexandria, in our high school, we have at least 15 different languages that are the primary languages of the students. So it is very important that all of our housing information be in languages in English as well as other languages.
Question, I think Todd, for you, and maybe we have groups of other human rights commissions here this evening. Some of what Dr. Johnson just presented are things that we have talked about, presented as well. Is there a coalition that is also raising things straight to our delegates and senators, or like of human rights commissions across the state of Virginia?
That's a great question. So one of the things that we used to talk about when the Virginia Association for Human Rights existed was
Right.
similar to what we're trying to do this evening, is share what each commission is currently working on, because no commission can directly bring those things
Right.
forth to the General Assembly. They all have to go through their city councils or board of supervisors, in a county. And so what we wanted to do is just know what each other is working on. And if any of those things overlap, let's advocate for the same bills to our appropriate city councils or county board of supervisors so that they go up to the General Assembly that way. So that's kind of the intent here, is that it's kind of a indirect coalition in that sense. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep, thank you.
And then, of course, like what Home is doing, you can advocate directly to the General Assembly. So if we're paralleling any proposals that you're putting forth, we're just kind of adding to that coalition aspect.
And
So
there are groups that advocate for different aspects, different human rights, there, whether it's housing or criminal justice reform or racial discrimination or gender discrimination or women's rights and reproductive. I mean, I think you can classify all of them as human rights.
Absolutely.
But I mean, do they advocate for something different than that? They pretty much stick to their
Their specific area.
specific area.
It's helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission?
I will be happy to send the commission a copy of all 34 of our legislative priorities.
That would be great.
And this is draft legislation, of course.
That would be wonderful.
Thank you very much, Dr. Johnson. All right. Mr. Sims?
I think that Mr. Sims is also having
Technical
technical
difficulties?
problems.
Okay. All right, we'll ask, before you arrived, Jelly Colson, we went over, I let Senator Dees know that you were here back in January with Lois Snook and I think Mr. Stroman as well, to talk about some legislative priorities that City Council brought up to you guys. Now you had just been like 3 or 4 days in Richmond and stuff, so you were just getting your feet wet and everything. So you had one session. And so we would like to ask you, what's next? What are some of the priorities you have coming up into this next session that we should know about and try to get behind?
Yeah, do you want me to come stand up
Please.
at the podium? Well, one thing from session is I'm feeling older. I used to be better. Now when I get up, I'm like, let me just work my way up. I don't know when that happened, but it was sometime during session, I guess, with a lot of sitting.
You made it.
Yeah, so I had my first session. It went really well. I've got freshman legislator of the year, passed more bills than any other freshman, 34 of us. Got 8 bills signed, 11 bills all the way to the governor. 3 of those were vetoed. Did get some of our priorities through, got the city council salary bill through. That was actually really surprisingly hard. Had to do a lot of meetings to get to where we raised it at least for inflation, and we allowed city councilors to adjust as they go on. And that's important because it allows people to serve and represent from a variety of backgrounds, which ultimately, hopefully, would lead to more representative government. Let's hope for that. So you asked about the future, though, so I'm not going to spend too much time going over, especially because you've had people weigh in. Laura gave a great update on tenants. That was a big, and so I'm not going to revisit that this year. I am just now starting my kind of legislative packet. I will say that I carried a lot of foster care legislation this last year. That was my area of expertise. And a lot of people have given me the advice that you kind of become known for one thing. And would you say that's fair, Cree? Like you kind of get areas of expertise.
You get areas of expertise.
Yes. And so I wanted social services to be mine. I'm not sure that it will always be mine because what instead became mine was criminal justice reform. I think it's just the makeup of the body right now. There's not a lot of lawyers serving. There's no lawyer sitting right now on the House side, Democratic House side, who has been a prosecutor or done criminal code. So that's a real kind of lack there, and I'm the closest that they have. So I at least have been in a semi-prosecutorial role because I did abuse and neglect cases and I've been in trials. So that got me put on the courts committee. I'm in a few days, or like today, I guess, I'm gonna chair the Black Legislative Caucus Criminal Justice Policy Committee. And I'm getting approached by a lot of organizations about carrying criminal justice reform. And so the biggest one that I just had a meeting on today is about a comprehensive kind of omnibus probation reform bill. And that would be making it so that those people who are leaving our jail system, as the vast majority of them do, and come back into society, have support, structure, things in place that will help them reintegrate and have successful lives. So that's a bill I'm working on that I think is going to be a big one next year. And is important to me. I'm also, I actually prepared notes for this. I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. You'll talk, I'm sure y'all got the update on the 1% sales tax, got vetoed. Yes. I did want to make note, y'all, because I've had a few meetings and I actually went to the let me just name drop. I went to this place, the White House. It turns out they were inviting everyone. Biden's doing a really big push to bring people in. But I went to their gun safety one, and I did have a really good conversation about how Medicaid has been expanding the uses that you can claim. And so I just wanted to make sure to mention to y'all that that's kind of a promising emerging area. Is that I think there's going to become a way to draw down Medicaid funds for homelessness, which is technically, a health-related issue, and gun violence prevention programs, because gun violence is a health-related issue that can affect communities. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned that to you. Also wanted to mention electronic meetings, because that was a priority I think that y'all had in previous years, expanding the use of electronic meetings. That did get passed with Bennett Parker, so there. So yeah, my big thing, I would say in broad strokes, is going to be criminal justice reform. Probably will be where I can be the most use to you guys, because I sit on that committee, because I have those connections. And so certainly if you have anything in that field, reach out to me. I'm trying to think. I got a constituent feedback from someone who wanted to, if we're talking about really hyper local issues that were brought to me, make sure that our police vehicles have a defibrillator. All of them have external easy for you to say. So that's one that I'm researching. Medicare to Medicaid funds for homelessness and affordable housing is another one that I'm looking into. Update on John. I put in a piece of bill to try to allow them to do collective bargaining. I think there's a reading of the existing statute that they should already be allowed to do it. It doesn't make sense that Charlottesville CAT drivers can unionize or collectively bargain, but John cannot, and they serve the same service areas. I try to get a legislative fix to clarify that, yes, they could. It got rolled into Kathy Tran's bill, which was much more comprehensive expansion of that, and hers died. I'm a freshman legislator, so I'm not, like, I guess I might be a sophomore. Not sure the best way to handle it. I was actually talking to my LA on the way here and my legislative director, and I was saying, I think no matter what, it would have rolled into hers, but it's interesting because mine's a very specific little fix, and when it's part of the bigger bill, it dies. Maybe sometimes it's better to do the little pieces. So I'm going to relook at that one potentially. And then lastly, the one I wanted to point out with y'all, and this is just the beginning. I actually got a list of 22 different bills. It's a short session. We're only allowed to carry 15. So I'm not sure which will be my final ones, but one other one I'm looking into is a youth court docket, which would be a diversion program for juveniles that are going through the criminal court system. Researching it right now, working with UVA Law, working with a local person who's interested in it, and I'm going to see where that can go. So that's what I'm working on in this moment. And other than that, I'm happy to answer questions. I do want to say Pri and I opened up an office. We have it. I actually walked to it from here, so we have that. You're always welcome to come by, schedule a meeting. We're not there all the time, but if you reach out to us, we'll be there. Yes, I know, and we'll happy to have a meeting and talk about any priorities that you have. And thank you for inviting me and letting me give you the update. Other than that, I'll take questions.
So, criminal reform. There's some stuff going around about criminalizing housing or being homeless. I know that's recent.
That's very recent. That's your Supreme Court.
It's very, very recent. What are your thoughts on that? That's a tough one.
obviously, I don't think we should criminalize homelessness.
Yeah.
Other than that, that's really interesting. I don't think I'm ready to give, I don't have a instant
Okay.
response, because that's good. That's something I should look into, because you're right, that case just came down, and so I think I was just somewhere where, like yesterday, my time is blending together, where someone mentioned that as an emerging issue and potentially being proactive about making sure that
Yeah,
it's not. It was someone talking in relation to how the Supreme Court is putting so much on the states, but then it's opening up. It was at the NOW event. It was Professor Ann Kaufman was talking about that particular one and how that's kind of the scary next zone. So certainly something that I can be thinking about what we can do to proactively make sure that that's not the case.
because homelessness is such a huge issue here in Charlottesville, and there are just don't have a fix for now. Everything's down the road, houses being built. But the issue of homelessness is not going anywhere. And, you know, and if this goes through faster than housing being built, then, you know, it's gonna make it a really tough situation for people, and, you know, easy fix, especially with some of the language that was heard in our last city council meeting about homelessness on the downtown mall and things like that. You know, that's not a fix to criminalize people that are homeless. The fix is taking that money taking that money on things and putting it back as far as resources to help the city build housing, or help help an organization that has the desire, has space to put housing in place to help them go faster, so they're not going all over the place to find grants and money to do that. But this, you know, I'm just really concerned about that coming down, and us not thinking about how we're going to help support people in that way. So I know you don't have any answers.
No, but it's
Right.
important, that's important to hear. And the good thing is we have the majority. Does Cree have the answers behind me?
I don't know if they had the answer, but you think about it, what the Supreme Court said is it was an ordinance from a town in
Yes.
Oregon.
Yes,
And they said that the towns have the right to do that. The local governments can criminalize some aspect of housing. That doesn't mean it's gonna happen. That means that you have to keep the pressure on your local governments to make sure it doesn't happen. But that was still a bad decision. It's like the Dobbs decision. The Dobbs decision sent a question of abortions back to the states, when you've seen what a mess has been created around the country because of that. I mean, that's the same, it's a bad decision. But it's not gonna happen here, I don't think.
I think it's important to bring up the point, and I think I'm gonna be really frank, I think keeping the majority stays important, but I think beyond that, if what I'm hearing from you is right, it's still important to be proactive on that front, and I think that's a good position for us to take.
yes. Thank you.
Can I ask, as you were talking about the probation reform, the reentry piece of that, or, I mean, I think all of it is the reentry. But any pieces of that I'm just curious to hear a little bit more about what that will look like.
So my probation reform bill, which the advocacy organization I worked with was Reform Alliance. They're a fabulous organization. They pass legislation in a bunch of states. They have a great lobbying arm to help me. And it's about incentivizing good behavior and rewarding it. So instead of the punishment portion, I want to give Speaker Don Scott some credit. He passed a really important piece of probation reform 3 years ago, which the second biggest cause of kind of mass incarceration is probation, was probation violations. It's people who've actually served their time for their underlying crime, and then they could have a technical violation. You know, like I didn't show up on time to my meeting, send you back to jail as punishment. So he rewrote that portion. That was a really important piece. This bill that I'm thinking about is gonna tweak elements of that, and then the biggest chunk of it is now let's talk about the people who are on probation. We've gotten a little bit of the stick away. Now let's get the carrot there.
Right.
And the carrot is, if you do the things that as a society we want, so if you go back and get education, if you keep employment for 6 months, let's shave some time off your probation. so that you're not under supervision for 10 years. When for 6, you've been working full-time, got a degree and so that's it. The specific things that it was like, earning a college degree, getting high school equivalency, getting an apprenticeship, completing a substance abuse program, approved substance abuse program, being a substance abuse counselor, maintaining employment. Those are like the main ones. I do think that was the old bill. It's all very new, but my understanding is that there's going to be some changes to how we think about probation success in the coming months. And I'm just part of those conversations as we move forward. So that's kind of what I've been envisioning that front.
Thank you.
It goes along with the probation reform and more the re-entry part, but are you looking at the intersection of re-entry and then barriers of accessing housing?
I mean, I know of them, that specific bill. Less so, but it's hard because I literally just had this conversation this morning with someone that I know very well, and I don't know how much is like public or not. So I think there's some understanding that there needs to be a more holistic approach to how we look at success and being successful when you're outside of jail, and that includes looking at those barriers. I don't know if it's going to be comprehensive to the extent we would want, or at least that I would want, where you really say, if we can't find housing, how do you expect someone to do X, Y, and Z beyond that? But at least I think we're getting to a point where we say, like, if you have at least found housing, that's a sign of success right there. That's something that we should take into account. Because that is success, that is hard, that is something that, and you know, how do we incentivize people to do that? That makes sense. Best I can. Happy to talk off the record.
Any other questions from commissioners? Any questions from commissioners that are online?
Oh, have they not been able to see me or y'all?
Hello. But no questions. I'm happy with to listen.
Okay, thank you, Heather. Heather's one.
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. All right. Commissioners, y'all good? Good.
Please reach out if you need me. I'm always available, happy to talk.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Senator Deeds, same thing for you, your priorities or?
Well, what Katrina said is right. As in the legislature, if you're there while your legislative package flows by around your committees, the committees, you know, the legislative service is a full-time responsibility. We don't want a part-time job. During the session, regular session, it's kind of a 7 in the morning till 7 at night sort of job. You stay focused, and the committees to really work over the bills, to try to read them and understand them, and then understand all the different sides, all the aspects. It requires an awful lot of work, and so your legislation kind of follows your committees. Like Katrina, I'm on the Courts of Justice Committee of the Senate, but in the past, I was the chair of the Transportation Committee. So you're going to see that I've carried a lot of transportation bills in the past. I was chair of Courts of Justice Committee. You're going to see a whole lot of criminal justice reform and just criminal justice bills that I've carried. And one thing I was chair most recently, the Privileges and Elections Committee. And so there are a whole lot of election related bills in my bailiwick. Right now, I'm the chair of Commerce and Labor, so I've got a lot of energy bills in particular that I've been working on to try to figure out. Here's the thing. We're the only state in the South that's set, and this is a human rights issue, not as direct maybe as some of these other issues, but we're the only state in the South in 2020, we passed the Clean Economy Act to require decarbonization of our energy production by 2050. It's human rights because it's human survival. You know, where it's that this climate change issue is existential. And we passed the bill to get to 2050. But the reality is we're adding to our needs by the rate of over 5% a year, primarily because of the data centers. We're going to have to radically explode the renewable energy in Virginia if we got any hope at all to get to our production. And that's to remove carbon from energy production by 2050. You know, I don't expect to be alive then, but it's still a goal that we have to meet. And while some people might say it's too modest, nobody else in this area, nobody else in this part of the country has gone there. So we have to get it done this past year, I had, bills related to both wind energy and solar, that didn't survive because of lots of different aspects. You know, I appreciate the idea that even though bills get vetoed or unsuccessful, that you keep pushing them, and sometimes you do, but sometimes you've got to figure out where your time and effort is better spent to get things. In the world we live in right now, as I said before, we have 21 out of 40 members of the state Senate are Democrats. 51 out of 100 members of the House are Democrats. So we have very narrow, the narrowest majorities. We have a Republican governor. So, you know, as I told you, he vetoed 201 bills this year. 4 were mine, 3 were Katrina's. I think Amy had 1 or 2, didn't she? Vetoes, maybe. So a bunch of them came from this community. A bunch of the vetoes. We aren't afraid to take on controversial issues, but I think we have to be smart about what we pursue, because the reality is we got to deal with this guy one more session. There's good news and bad news and a one-term governor. The bad news is when you get a good governor, you only have 4 years. That governor, if that governor is smart, they focus, they develop a plan of action, and they make all 4 years productive. The last governor to do that, maybe the only one in our lifetimes, is Jerry Balaus, who was governor elected in '85 and served from '86 to '90. He was the best. I'm very methodical in the way he did it. The good news is that the governor, the good news from one term is the governor's a lame duck from the moment he's elected, because he can't run for re-election, and his power, his or her power, diminishes from the moment they take office. Now he's in his 4th year. Why should I fear Glenn Youngkin? Why should I fear the governor? Why should anyone fear the governor? There are Republicans in the legislature that want to do the right thing, that are not terrible people, and I think that there's always a possibility to get bills done. We just have to be smart about what we work on. I've taken the last number of years. I chair the what's called the Behavioral Health Commission. Deals with another aspect of human rights. The rights of and service for people who struggle with mental illness and substance abuse. And my legislative agenda has been jammed with that the last 10 years. And I've been jammed with that as well this time around, working to try to figure a way to develop more services. The goal was to make sure that Virginians, no matter where they live, have access to the services they need to be able to live the best life they can. My view is, I don't really like the word disability. I just think it's differing abilities. Every person has a right to live the best life they can. We've got an obligation to try to make that happen. The other thing I do, I'm on the Senate Finance and Appropriations Committee. I think I told you in the beginning I was on the conference committee, and so I'm in the room with the final process of putting budgets together. I chair the subcommittee on health and human resources. The largest part of from a dollar standpoint is healthcare and human resources, and so you don't see as many bills from me sometimes that relate to that, because I'm carrying budget amendments, and a lot of that internal process is making sure we have the right we've got the right amount of money to pay for things. For example, we've just gone through this unwinding of Medicaid. During the medical emergency that was COVID-19, people didn't have to requalify for Medicaid. We projected, our Medicaid's rolls swelled to over 2 million people on Medicaid. We saw hundreds of thousands of people coming off the roll, and we projected a certain amount of money because budget's built on projections. Well, back in the winter, what we knew, and the governor wouldn't go along, and neither would our friends in the House of Delegates. But what we in the Senate knew is that our projections were off. part of the reason was people that were coming off Medicaid were going back on. And so we set aside $150 million in our Senate budget to try to cover the shortfall that we knew we were gonna have. And I think we finally got the governor and the House of recalcitrant people to agree to a $95 million reduction. But we found out that our shortfall at the end of the year was $140 million. So we were pretty daggone close to what we needed. And to try to factor the right forecast for Medicaid in the future is going to be an issue. I'll give you another example. We worked for a number of years to provide a dental benefit for adults on Medicaid. The reality is the mouth is the gateway to the health plan. We have a benefit for children. Other states have benefit for adults. We didn't. We were going on the cheap. So we finally got that benefit. And we were having a meeting with the committee down in Abington. A dentist was talking about the virtues of this program. And I, asked the question, how's it affecting your practice? He said, oh no, I can't afford to take Medicaid. We had to go back to the drawing board and figure out what kind of increase in the reimbursement to this benefit we had just created that we sent providers back into the market. So the whole healthcare field is very complicated in terms of funding, but I'll be focused in that area and focused in mental health. I'll probably also be working on some campaign finance reform and some election law, which I've worked in the past. It'll be a bit busy session, that's for sure. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any commissioners have any questions?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. We have,
They were not able to come back,
They were able
but
to come back.
we can follow up with them
Okay.
via email.
okay, thank you. Does anybody out in the audience have any questions for our legislators that are here on this evening?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Commissioners have anything?
No, just thank you very much. That was great.
Awesome. Senator Deeds and Delegate Coulson, thank you so much for your time on this evening. You gave us a lot of information. And Lauren, Ms. Dodds, thank you so much. I may need to talk to you. We might know some people. So, go ahead. But this is kind of what we wanted to hear. And to know how we want to begin to craft what we want to send to City Council. Community, please be able to look, if you're listening, please be able to look out for something coming, hopefully, that you can help us as far as weigh in on what you heard on this evening. It's going to happen. Yeah, we're going to try to put some out to the community so that if they re-listen to the cast tonight, they can send us information per questions that we develop so that we can get a better idea of what the community is saying, and not just us, because it's not just us. We're, only 7 members of the community, of a larger community that has more issues and things that we don't know about. Because a lot of times people that are going through don't come to these meetings. It's, those that have more control are the ones that are here. But the people that have the issues or going through those things do not attend. So, and so I understand that, and I want to be very conscious of that it's not just what we hear, what we think, but, it can be helpful from a community standard as well. Again, commissioners have anything?
My head is full.
Yes.
Yes.
Mary?
Yeah, I really appreciated the presentations and hearing from other folks, and I think, you know, for me, it really reinforced that we need to continue to focus on housing and homelessness as issues that are really crises for this community. You know, the combination of how expensive housing is and the weak laws protecting tenants is a pretty powerful combination for evil. So I really appreciated hearing from folks about that.
And also trying to figure out a way to educate. You know, not just the housing, but also landlords and stuff like that. I mean, not that they said that they would do it, but just to find a way to hopefully them do it better. And not be as ethical as some things we hear that go on. So if everybody's good, you guys are good. Well, again, thank you guys for being here.
Thank you for coming to Richmond
Yeah.
during session.
Yeah, I hope we come back.
Yeah, always welcome. 901.
Yeah, all right, yes. And we thank you guys. We do have to do public comment, don't we? Yes. Okay, stop. So we have more business to do as a commission. We need to check out our work plan to make sure we are on point. Our work plan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lily. So we are right now at July the 18th. We've had our legislative focus meeting. See, has the office found us to train opportunities for public hearings?
Public hearings, good question. So what we've done right now, we're kind of in the middle of the ordinance changes. I
Okay,
want to see where we get with that, if we can get through those ordinance changes. Which is kind of radically changing how public hearings will work for you all.
Okay.
I think at that point is the time to start to look again at what training opportunities you might need. Because it may not be as complex as before when you had to think about introduction of new evidence, cross-examination, all that stuff. So, yeah, that's something still pending. It's not, we had talked to somebody previously who might have been able to train through kind of that whole process, but now we could retool a little bit if the ordinance goes through. So stay tuned.
all right. So we have a work session on August the 1st. I will say right now, let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so we'll see you guys on August the 1st and Thursday. And right now we are set for being here that day.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
as far as I know, I'm gonna look at the calendar right now while you're talking.
And then on the 15th, we'll talk about the 15th on the 1st. Okay?
Okay.
Anything else we should coming up? That I can see. No. Okay. I think we can talk about anything else on the 1st. All right, confirmation of next workshop. Yep, we want to do that on August. Is there any new business? No new business?
You mentioned the poll, send that to the public, is there,
We are still crafting.
still crafting it, all right,
Yes, we're
all
crafting.
right, should be out next week. All
Yeah,
right,
we're crafting.
my question was like, do y'all need extra hands?
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
Oh, I never deny extra hands. Yeah,
Great.
extra eyes.
I'll look at it.
Yeah, okay, awesome. Matters of the public. Is there anyone, from our attendees that have any questions, anything? Come on.
No, I would just like to thank you very much for inviting our commission. I appreciate the invitation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Johnson.
you, appreciate you.
No matters of the public?
If any other attendees would like to speak, you can use the raised hand icon or *9 if you're joining on a telephone.
Nothing? All right. Commissioner updates? All right. Next steps, we'll see you guys on August 1st. And be on the lookout, if you would like to have any input on the poll, we'll send it out to everyone, so you can have input. We want to try to get it out as quickly as possible. Okay? All right, it is 8:05, we are adjourned.
Thank you, Ernest.
Thank you.